Thank you, everyone, for attending UIC Law's Center for IP Information and Privacy Law's World IP Day event. I promise to keep these opening remarks as short as I can, because I am certain, for obvious reasons, that you did not register to hear me talk. I want to thank our annual sponsors, McAndrews, Held and Malloy, and Leidig, Voigt and Mayer, without whose support we could not offer programming such as this. Thank you also to our institutional partners. If you requested CLE, approval for professional responsibility credit is still pending. Today, we join the World Intellectual Property Organization to celebrate women inventors, creators, entrepreneurs, and IP attorneys around the globe. Women around the world are shaping the future through their imagination and ingenuity, but still face significant challenges, whether in accessing the resources or support they need or in finding that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are more theater than substance. We have invited an amazing group of panelists for today's discussion, and I look forward to listening and learning so that I and all of us can better be informed in our efforts to change that which is within our power to ensure that everyone, regardless of gender, race, religion, sexual identity, social, economic status, and all other aspect of human difference, has the same access and support needed to thrive in whatever career they choose. Our moderator today is Ester Lim, a partner and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Finnegan. Ester has over 25 years of experience in patent litigation, portfolio management, and counseling, and has litigated extensively before the federal district courts, the ITC, and the Federal Circuit. Ester is the firm's Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer and oversees the firm's diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, initiatives, and goals. She is past president of the 110,000 member District of Columbia Bar, and since 2003, she has been teaching as an adjunct professor at Howard University School of Law, serving as the co-chair of its annual conference on intellectual property and social justice, which celebrated the 20th anniversary in March 2023. And I'm happy to say the Intellectual Property and Social Justice Institute's Mosaic Conference will be co-hosted by UIC Law in Chicago this fall. Without further ado, I turn this event over to Ester.
Thank you so much, Gary. Happy World IP Day and welcome to all of you. It's a distinct honor for me to be moderating this fabulous panel of women in the IP profession. Challenges and opportunities in IP. There's a lot to unpack in that topic, and we have a great panel ahead of us, bringing different perspectives, experience, backgrounds, and practice settings. We are enormously fortunate to bring a diversity of viewpoints and to hopefully offer insights and takeaways that you can implement, whether you're a student in private practice, in corporations, and beyond. The focus of today's discussion, which we hope will be interactive, will be to identify challenges in IP, but with a focus on opportunities and discussing solutions, particularly with concrete personal experiences. The theme that we hope to weave for you today is the courage to confront challenges and the courage to create opportunities. To do this, I would like to welcome each of the panelists to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their backgrounds. Lisa, may we start with you?
Thank you, Esther. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be among such an esteemed group of colleagues on this panel. A little bit about my background. Well, first of all, I'm managing partner and founder of my own law firm, Dunner Law. In about a month, it'll be 21 years since I founded it, which is frightening to me. We practice in the trademark copyright area. It's a small IP boutique with just a few attorneys. My background actually is as a professional tennis player. And I think that's given me a lot of the oomph and courage to do a lot of the things that I did, in addition to having an incredibly supportive family, partner, colleagues. I could not have done anything that I've done without that. That's been tremendously important to me, and surrounding myself around people that are so supportive has been huge. I'm very involved in the ABA IP section. I'm currently a delegate for the section involved in lobbying on certain IP efforts. I'm a past commissioner on the Commission for Women in the Profession, also part of the ABA. Been involved in lots of initiatives like so many folks here, but with that, I'll turn this over to one of our other colleagues to introduce herself.
Fraline?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Esther, for hosting this event, and to Gary and the UIC Law Center for IP for organizing this event. I'm also honored to be here and to discuss opportunities in IP with this distinguished group of women. I have more than a decade of qualified legal experience as a patent attorney, patent lawyer in the Chicago area. As a solo patent practitioner, I've conducted research, for example, filed patent applications across a broad spectrum of patent classifications, including a broad spectrum of technology. I've worked with individual inventors in the Chicago area, as well as throughout the United States, and inventors in other countries. For example, I work with startups, emerging companies, and big corporations. So outside of work, I keep working with challenging cases and situations that might not necessarily be associated with work, but they're assets to my clients. I participate in bar activities, community service, in ongoing activities to foster sort of the professional growth and responsibilities as the owner of a small business. So I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much, Fraline. Michelle, may we go to you next?
Of course. So happy to be here. I'm Michelle Wall. I'm a partner at Swanson, Martin & Bell. I have a background in intellectual property. Obviously, I got my LLM at the same time as my JD. I'm a partner, vice chair of our entertainment and media practice group, a member of our intellectual property practice group. I come from a very musically inclined family. So I took my IP background and very naturally and organically intertwined it with the entertainment space. So my clients are, singer-songwriters, producers, engineers. I negotiate all sorts of deals from, recording, publishing, performance contracts. I'm all about community outreach and empowering and uplifting women in particular and people of color. I am a huge proponent of Women in Music here in Chicago, the Chicago chapter, and I'm pretty heavily involved with Lawyers for the Creative Arts, which is a pro bono organization here in our lovely city that provides pro bono legal services to members of the arts and entertainment communities. And that is all I have for today. I'll pass it along.
Thank you, Michelle. What is your musical talent?
Well, I was a first-tier flute player and a first-tier clarinet player, but nobody wanted me to front their band. So I decided I would take the business side of things. But you know what? No regrets.
Well, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. Sanjana, we're over to you.
Thank you, Esther. And thank you for having me today, Gary, Esther, for moderating. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy World IP Day. I am a patent attorney, and I'm currently in a slightly different role. So I'm currently serving as a generalist. I'm working as head of legal for Avail, which is a subsidiary of Allstate. It's Allstate's peer-to-peer car sharing company. And I still identify as a patent attorney. That's how I introduce myself. That's how I think of myself. And it's an identity that's integral to me. Before Allstate, I've been here for about 6 years now. Before Allstate, I've worked at 2 different law firms. One was an IP boutique firm in the Alexandria, Virginia area, which was a great area to be in as a young attorney just passing out of law school. And then after that, I worked at a large general practice firm in the Midwest that had an IP practice. So I've kind of seen IP being done in very different ways at a boutique firm, at a general practice firm, and now at Allstate. Before I lateraled into this generalist role, I did serve as Allstate's chief patent counsel for 3 years. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I look forward to the conversation with these wonderful women.
Thank you, Sanjana. What a journey through various practice backgrounds. We'd love to hear more about that during our discussion. Last, but of course not least, is Ayala. First of all, you have the best virtual background. We envy that.
Well,
So
I'll explain
please tell us more about that.
Yes, I will. My name is Ayala Deutch, and currently I am Deputy General Counsel of NBA Properties here in New York, which is the marketing and licensing, essentially the commercial arm of the National Basketball Association. I oversee the global IP function as well as our various commercial and transactional work. But Sanjana's, I'm not a patent lawyer. I'm the closest thing the NBA has, but I'm not. But I am an IP lawyer. That's where I came from. So prior to being Deputy General Counsel, I was Chief IP Counsel, where I oversaw the global IP matters for the National Basketball Association, its affiliated leagues, the WNBA, the NBA G League, the NBA 2K League, the Basketball Africa League, and all their teams. Prior to that, I was in private practice at Cleary Gottlieb Steen & Hamilton in New York, where I focused on IP litigation and counseling, primarily trademarks and copyright. I have had a long commitment to and passion for the advancement of women in the profession generally and IP specifically. Most recently, that has included my stint as president of the International Trademark Association, where INTA launched the Women's Leadership Initiative. Currently at the NBA, I'm executive champion for the NBA's Women's Network, which is our women's ERT. And I've previously served on the New York City Bar Association Committee for Women in the Profession. And like the other speakers, very pleased and honored to be here and appreciate the invitation from Gary and Esther moderating.
Thank you so much, Ayala. As you all can see, we have a fabulous panel, and we are really eager to learn a bit more about their backgrounds, how they came to be doing what they're doing. And so if I may, Ayala, building off of your introduction and how you started in IP, we'd love to learn a little bit more about how you got started in IP in the first place and particular decisions and events that helped you to be where you are today.
Sure. I always tell young law students and young lawyers who ask me that question to do as I say and not as I did, because I was very unplanned and unstrategic. I knew I wanted to be a litigator, which is how I began my career. I never took an IP class in law school. I don't know that I had any real notion of what it was, and therefore I was not looking for law firms with IP practices. And I went to Cleary Gottlieb, which is a great law firm, but at the time had virtually no IP practice. And how I became an IP lawyer is that one of the litigation partners got a case that involved whether or not the trade dress of radiator heating units was protectable. And he put me on the case just as a junior litigation associate. And I was hooked. And I often say to people, as someone who now works for a very well-known sports brand, if you can get passionate about IP based on the design of radiators, then you're an IP geek. So I was just taken with the notion of the value of intangible property, both to the property owners and the value of what they could do for consumers from a trademark, trade dress, and brand standpoint. And I guess in terms of life decisions, after that case, I went to the partner and I said, I want you to put me on every single case that has anything to do with this, and I will find the hours in the day to do it. At the time, I was doing a lot of international arbitration, and Cleary has a very strong international client base and things that were interesting, but not my passion. And so he did, and I became an IP lawyer, all because of the designs of radiators.
Wow. That's wonderful, because it really speaks to the power of serendipity, but also being open-minded about your career path.
and vocal, because I wanted it badly enough that I went out and asked for it. And I also made the decision in my head, you know, large law firms put young associates where there's a need, not necessarily where the young associate wants to be. And I made the decision that if I had to work on certain things because the firm needed me there, I was still going to somehow make the IP work for myself. And those, I think, are the two early career lessons I take away from that.
Good moves on your part.
Esther, I had the exact opposite experience.
Yes, I was just going to say, Lisa, you were basically born into an IP powerhouse.
I was, and I rebelled against it. I tried everything I could not to ask for it, not to do it, not to go down this route. I'm a little jealous of Ayala's career, by the way, given my sports background, but that's another story for another day. No, it's very interesting because I don't think for anybody it's always such a straight path. There's always things that sort of will dictate your route and your path, and there are things that you can't control. My dad, I think a lot of people know who Don Dunner was, a former partner of Ester's and at Finnegan. And so I pretty much was born into IP. They were probably reading the United States Patent Quarterlies when I was in my mom's womb, who knows? But, and my sister's a patent attorney. My mom's the only normal one in the family. But I did try to go a different route. I am an athlete and I love playing tennis, but you can't play professional sports forever. Your body kind of breaks down. I worked at the state's attorney's office in the felony trial division when I was in law school, and I loved that. I thought I wanted to be a litigator. I loved trial work. I loved everything about it. But then I got an offer from an IP boutique out of law school in Washington, D.C., Cushman, Darby & Cushman, which was a well-known IP firm back then. And I'm very interested in business and entrepreneurs and how people get involved in business and how it works. I've just always been fascinated by that, which is probably why I ended up starting my own. And I, like Sanjana, I was a partner at McDermott, Will & Emery, so I've been in the small firm boutiques, the big firms. I have not gone in-house. Maybe Ayala will take me on one day, but I'm probably too old for that. So. But it's never really a straight path, and I love what I've done, and I could not have opened my own practice without my background in a big firm and all the support and the things I learned along the way. But it is interesting how some people have a very direct path, but I think most people don't, and a lot of it is dictated by your personality. I think your personality ultimately will land you where you're meant to be, hopefully.
Well, we just heard two very different paths and timing of exposure from birth to very late, once after you've become a lawyer. But Lisa touched on an issue that is an important issue that I'd like to discuss with the panelists, and that is the power of mentoring and also sponsorship in guiding your career from early on to even as an experienced attorney. So Michelle, can you talk about, in your personal experience, how mentorship and sponsorship has made an impact in your career?
Absolutely. I think, as a young lawyer and even predating that as a law student, I tried to familiarize myself with people that were living the life and practicing the law that I had wanted to. And sometimes I kind of just, reached out to people and stalked other people until I could gain their attention. I don't know that I did like a full-on like official mentorship program. I just kind of made myself a mentee to multiple people, whether they know it or not, is beyond me at this point. But as I became more seasoned in my profession and in my field, I realized how critically important it is to engage in that community outreach, to pay forward what I had learned if I wanted to see this sort of legacy of women like my esteemed panelists continue to setting the bar, continue to see women moving forward and sort of reaching that, the diversity and inclusion and all of those topics that we talk about. So I, decided I was going to become the mentor and hopefully, ensure that young people who had the same interests as me were at least going to receive some of the knowledge, some of the tools and resources, at least to the extent that I could provide them. So, I got involved with the Recording Academy. They have a Grammy U mentoring program that is fantastic because I'm a huge proponent of not just being a mentor to other lawyers or aspiring lawyers, but also to, just creators and innovators and entrepreneurs and, getting into schools with our youngsters. That's really important to me too. And just encouraging them and motivating them and letting them know they're not alone. And there's people that are here and want to help them. And you don't have to stalk me. Like maybe I had to stalk a few people. So, the long and short of it is I find mentorship incredibly important. And I find it incredibly important for all of us on this panel to continue to pay it forward, to continue doing that community outreach so that gap that we keep talking about with equality starts moving, in the right direction. And we're well on our way, but obviously quite a bit of work to go.
Yes, and the concept of paying it forward is particularly important when we talk about women in IP. And when many of us started in the profession, there were fewer of us. And it's really empowering to see other women helping other women come along their career and paying it forward to support one another. So Fraline, in that theme of supporting one another and being, mutual mentors to other women, can you share with us an example of a mentor who's had a significant impact for you and why it has made an impact and how you found that mentor?
Okay, I have actually similar to Lisa. I had benefited actually from having a mentor early on. As a student, I lived in South Central Los Angeles. So having a mentor, especially at that time and in that environment, was very helpful. And I wouldn't be here today without that person. So I have several mentors. You never know, where you meet a colleague or a mentor. You can meet someone unexpectedly, for example, even in a sports setting. The first mentor that comes to mind for me is a lawyer that I met at a sporting event outside of work hours. I was on the tennis court. In my college years, I played Division I tennis and with the Southwest Athletic Conference. So in one practice venue, I met this mentor. The mentor turned out to be, for example, the chief patent counsel at an American food manufacturing and processing company at the time. The location was literally steps away from my office. We first met for lunch and discussed mainly startup concerns. There were many similarities in our background. And this mentor had studied chemistry at the United States Naval Academy. He had served in the United States military as a naval officer. Early on in his career, he started his own practice and later became, the chief patent counsel for this food company. So his experience alone was enough encouragement, and he provided enough information for me to further work on the foundation for my business and to work up the confidence to continue to build my practice. So a second mentor, which I was lucky enough to meet or, to have to work with, is a Harvard educated physicist and lawyer. I met this mentor because my firm was hired, as in many other situations, to provide outside patent counsel work and support for a company in the auto industry. And he is the chief patent counsel for the company. We ended up having a lot of meaningful conversations. Obviously, a lawyer with a PhD in physics has a strong foundation in math and science. And fortunately, in the patent arena, when you're, working with a patent mentor, you're in the science field and you're working with highly skilled, individuals like most of us here on this panel. However, in any conversation or in any setting, it is always immediately apparent, that this person is skilled, he's analytical, he's a critical thinker, he solves problems. And in my opinion, his mentorship was always of the highest caliber. his approach was not always just systematic in terms of what a patent attorney would do in the normal course of patentability or, determining patentability, but precise and well-focused in providing information that would not just be helpful in a specific setting or a specific format, but moving forward in building a business and in acquiring skills as a patent attorney.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing the two different types of mentors that has benefited you. Sanjana, I'd like to ask you a question. You shared during your self-introduction how you still consider yourself a patent attorney, but now you're a generalist as head of legal. Share with us perhaps different types of mentors you've had in those two different types of settings.
Absolutely. So I guess my career path has been more similar to Lisa's. So IP happens to you over time. To me, I was the 17-year-old kid who said, I'm going to go to engineering school and then go to law school. So it was not a lot of 18-year-olds say that they're going to be a patent attorney. I was definitely the oddball there. But I was just very clear in my head that that's what I wanted. I thought that's what I was going to retire as. I thought that was my calling, which I still think it is. But different things happen and life takes you another way. When I was primarily doing patent law, my mentors were similar to Fraline's experience. They were chief IP counsels or chief patent counsels at other companies. I had come across them in various social settings. One of them groomed me to take the position that I had taken at Allstate. And he had been a chief IP counsel at various other tech firms before he came to Allstate. And I was able to step into his shoes. But the kind of mentorship I received at that point was kind of more broadening my horizons when it came to IP. And so the passion was already there. The interest was already there. And I was pushing boundaries in a subject matter that I was good at. Once I was doing that role for a bit, I came across another mentor who was also in a leadership role at Allstate. And she said, I think you should try something other than IP. I think you're a great subject matter expert, but you've never tried anything else to know whether you're good at it or not. And I think you have translatable skills. You will be able to do it. And I kept questioning her decision. I was like, this just doesn't make sense to me. Why would I do that? I have lived my whole adult life and built my career up to this point. I'm chief patent counsel. This is what I always envisioned when I was in law school. Why would I give this up to try something new? And it's a very scary prospect because at that point in time, I was running the Center for Excellence. People were coming to me, taking my advice unquestionably. And now if I were to go into a more generalist role, I could be in a position where people were like, well, you're an IP attorney. How would you know about employment law? How would you know? And they had a point. How would I know? But I'm glad that this mentor pushed me to take on this role. I'm glad that she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I think a lot of times that's what you need a mentor for. You need them to be more experienced than you. You need them to have seen different facets of the career that you're in so that then they can help you identify and say, you're not even looking at this. You have blind spots on, take them off, try something new. And I think the foundation for that relationship is trust. I just trusted her. I just knew that when she was saying something, there was something there, and it was a trust that I had in her that made me take that leap. And I'm just so surprised to say that I love the role that I'm in right now. I love having to deal with different legal issues. Like one might be a non-compliance. It might be a non-compliance for a certain type of law. Another day I'm dealing with like an employment issue. Another day I'm dealing with an IP issue, but just the variation of it is beautiful to me. And I see this out there to every student who's in school right now for an IP course, like, don't sell yourself short. Like, your skills are translatable. I was doing patent applications for automobiles and telematics and InsurTech, and all of that translates into something or the other that I'm doing every day. And I just didn't see that in myself until someone showed it to me.
Wait, isn't that one of the most powerful impacts that a mentor or sponsor can have, is to see in you what's there before you can see it for yourself, and realizing that the potential is there, but also that they're going to be there beside you to help you along the way. Sanjana, you mentioned something when you discussed the chief IP counsel who preceded you, and that he was grooming you for that position. So, I would venture to guess that many of us had not only mentors, but also sponsors. Who'd like to share the difference between the two, and a specific example of a sponsor that has made a difference in your career?
Actually, Esther, can I sort of answer that question without totally answering it? Because Sanjana has made me think of something. First of all, Sanjana has a great bumper sticker. IP just happens to you. I think we should make a bumper sticker out of that. But Esther, your question and a comment by Sanjana has made me think about something, because I've been involved in many mentoring programs throughout the country. And I think, and I believe there are a number of students that are listening in today, I think there's a lot of pressure out there for people to find mentors and to identify a mentor or a sponsor, one of the two. And I'm not even sure I know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. To me, mentors happen naturally. You don't, I'm impressed that Fraline and Sanjana can actually identify. I mean, I can identify people that have had a tremendous influence on my life and my career. My mentors aren't necessarily in the law. They've been tennis coaches or people that have surrounded me. Of course, my dad set a phenomenal example on his ethics, his work, and people that have preceded me have set examples, and I've followed those examples. And Esther, you're a mentor to me, whether you know it or not. I've never tagged you as a mentor, but just following the example by the way you lead, by the person you are, these are the kind of mentors in my life. And I think that there is just this inherent pressure out there for students, especially, to find a mentor, because we all talk about who was your mentor and how did you find it. I don't think you can just find a mentor. They just happen. They come into your life, and you've got to be able to soak up what people can teach you. You've got to focus on the good. Everybody has some maybe things that you'd prefer not to include in your repertoire, but most people have some good that you can follow. And if you really can pay attention to the good and the positives, and you can soak that up, that's really how you get mentoring. And if you're lucky enough to find that one or two or three people that can specifically call themselves as mentors, that's phenomenal. But I don't think you have to actually tag somebody as a mentor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Lisa, that's such a wonderful thought. And I'd like to follow that thread of how mentors can be all around us. And right back at you regarding being a mentor to each other, because you have set a phenomenal example for me and so many other women who look at your leadership, your entrepreneurship, your creativity and courage to have done what you do, but also giving back so actively to the ABA and others, AIPLA. That's such a beautiful thought. Because there's so many people all around us that we can learn from. And even if we don't have a personal relationship, I know that, for example, your dad, Don Dunner, was a mentor of mine before I ever started working with him. And he has been a lifelong mentor and a trusted friend and a colleague and a partner. But that all started because he set the example that I can follow through his hard work, dedication, and commitment to excellence in IP. So thank you for that thought. I really love that. We have about 50 minutes left in the program, but I wanted to make a brief comment to everyone in the audience. If you have a question or a comment you'd like to share, feel free to submit in the comment or Q&A section. We will try to address as many questions as we can as we go along the dialogue, because we will be weaving in and out of many topics, and we don't want you to wait until the very, very end. So feel free to share your comments and questions. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and touch on a topic that is very current today, and that is visibility of women in IP and in your respective organizations. There are so many issues with evolving workplace and the continuing burden or phenomenon of being invisible. That applies to women, that applies to other diverse communities, especially when you're intersectional, women of color. And we are navigating in not a traditional workplace setting, but an evolving one, in a hybrid one, in a virtual one, where workplace policies are changing constantly. Sanjana, I know that this is an area where you are also overseeing in your role as head of legal, managing a team and how you work together and considering the impact on women in IP. Could you address what's going on in your organization and what leadership you're trying to provide and policies you're trying to develop?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. And I might start off with just a personal anecdote of a time where I felt invisible. I was in a professional work setting. There's not a lot of women in IP. There's not a lot of South Asian women in IP. And I was just in this setting where our department had 2 South Asian women attorneys. And we were in different technology practice groups. We looked very different from each other. I am taller. You can't see height on Zoom, but I am a taller woman. And this colleague of mine was shorter. We wore our hair differently. We were just, in terms of physical appearance, there was not much that was alike, other than the fact that we happened to be originating from the same geographical area in the world. And her files would end up in my office and my files would end up in hers. We were constantly confused for each other. And what I'll say is that none of it was intentional. None of it was deliberate. No one was trying to hurt us or offend us in any way. And I knew all of that, but that was the end result, right? I know that it's not intentional. I know that I'm not being targeted. It was a happy enough work environment. But at the end of the day, this was happening. And you can overlook it if it happens once, you can overlook it if it happens twice. But then if this continues to happen to you month after month, you're starting to say, what is going on? Now I'm just not a name or just someone. Now I'm a person. You know me, you're interacting with me, we're meeting in the elevator, we're doing all of these different things. Why are you not able to keep this straight? And it just bothered me at a very fundamental level. And it doesn't make you feel good. However hard you work, however good you are at your job, if something like that is happening to you, you just feel like you're not visible. And so in my organization, I never want anyone to feel like that. I never want anyone to feel that way. And so some of the things that we're doing is we're really trying to understand how can you make people feel seen? Everyone wants to be seen in a different way. Everyone has different things for which they are good at, they want to be recognized at. And that might go above and beyond what they do at work, right? It could be they're running marathons. It could be they're running, they're doing different things with their kids. They're really good at arts and crafts. They're an excellent cook. But I think it goes to create a workplace where you are able to feel your truly authentic self. You're able to bring who you are outside of work and are very comfortable sharing it at work in those appropriate settings. So I think that we're trying to create a culture where we recognize that when things are not intentional, there is some kind of an unconscious bias that's probably kicking in. But then it's on the workplace to understand that those biases exist and what are those safe spaces that you can create to come together, to learn of its existence, to take those learnings and apply it to yourself directly and say, oh, this is what I'm doing, even though I might not intend to do so, and start off self-correcting. I think it's a never-ending journey. Like, you just need to be evolving and iterating and improving. But I'm really happy to be in a workplace that kind of recognizes all of this, that talks about all of this. And I'm trying to pay it forward by making sure that everyone who works on my team feels seen and feels seen for their whole self, not just because they did a really good job on a deal.
Sanjana, your experiences overlap with mine, where when I started as an associate at the firm, I was the only female Asian associate. And then sometime later, a second female Asian associate joined in a different practice group. And I started being confused and being called by her name. My reaction was, hey, I was here first. You should be calling her by my name if there are mistakes making. But I do share with you that is not an uncommon experience when you are a minority in any group, and unconscious, lack of exposure, inexperience, all of that. But nonetheless, it does not mitigate the impact that those patterns leave on you. And so I really appreciate you sharing that experience.
So Esther, I have a question for you, back at you, but what do you do in that situation?
I spoke up in those instances where I was confused, and I did it politely, saying, hey, I'm in the electrical group, not in the bio group, and I've been here for, a year or 2 years, whatever. And again, like you, Sanjana, I felt that we looked nothing alike. We had very different physical characteristics and personalities. But again, I did not assign any malintent. And so it was just a question of helping others to learn about the differences so that they can better distinguish us, and just getting to know people better on one-on-one relationships. And, this was over 25 years ago. And so we're talking about an era where diversity was not discussed in a way that we embrace today. Right. DEI was not even a coined term at that time. I'm Korean American, Korean by ethnicity. I immigrated to this country when I was 12 years old. So I have very strong affinity and connection to the Korean culture and custom and language. At that time in the late 90s, many people had never tried Korean food. And when I would ask, hey, do you want to try Korean food? The first question is it like Chinese food? Because that's the only thing they had exposure to. And I look back at that now, and it's pretty incredible, because with the rise of technological advancements and visibility of Korean high-tech companies, Korean culture and K-pop and K-drama and K-cuisine, it's really hard to believe that, you know, people will confuse Chinese and Korean food. But again, I took that as an opportunity for a way for me to bond with others and to share something that they did not have exposure to. And some of them have become the biggest fans of Korean food now. They're asking me, when will you take me out for our next, you know, lunch at a Korean restaurant? But it's really evolved. And so one of the lessons that I take away from that experience is, even though I felt very different, sometimes, you know, not seen, especially being perceived as being very quiet or submissive, even though I had no problem speaking up when I had to speak up. And I think Lisa would attest that Don will say the same thing about me. But just, you know, those perceptions and stereotypes. But reflecting on it, it really gave me an opportunity to use my differences as a connection point and not a dividing point with others around me.
Esther, I think that, first of all, both what you two have experienced, and I'm sure everybody's experienced at some level here, does not feel good at all, no matter what the intent is. And I think, Esther, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, the important thing really is to do what you two are doing, which is to pay it forward, to figure out a way to not let this happen to other people and try to improve the situation. And you become mentors in this whole area of thought where people are actually leading by example. And hopefully people will take a little more time. And it's hard now with, you know, sort of a pandemic still going on. We're not in person as much. So it's a little harder to get to know people. But getting to know the whole person, I think, is a really helpful thing to do, to do everything you can to change the situation, because there is bias, it's unconscious, and it is continuing. I think it's a little bit better, but there's still a very long way to go.
I agree, you know, with Lisa, Esther, Sanjana. Thanks for sharing your story. So I agree 100%. And I do appreciate, for example, to hear, you know, that you're able to analyze the situation, intent, non-intent, you know, how do you solve the problem? What does it mean for you? What did it mean, you know, 20 something years ago? What does it mean moving forward? You know, and what you're looking at. So obviously there are many situations where it's not as a straightforward approach. You know, it takes a more concerted effort and analysis. You know, for example, in my case as an African American, you know, my analysis is it racism? You know, is there some sort of an anti-racism effort? You know, or is it just an anti-racist effort? You know, and here are the facts. Here's the situation, and respect. You know, I think should always be something that is a part of when you think of concerted effort, you think of respect, right? Being sort of the step one in moving forward. You know, what is this person, you know, what are the clues? You know, this person, these groups of people, groups of students, whether they're in a law school setting or a college environment, you know, what are the clues? What are they talking about? Why are they feeling this way, for example? And then moving forward with the discussion in that regard. And then in some cases, you might be looking at, you know, where, you know, when Sanjana was talking, for example, I'm thinking, okay, there are two people involved, or in Esther's case, or, you know, a confusion among two people. But sometimes you have a situation where it's more than two people, you know, that are going through a situation. So you're looking at an outcome analysis. You know, what can we do to get rid of this outcome? You know, what are some efforts that we all have to do together? And I still feel that it starts with spreading that aspect of respect and then moving forward with the efforts.
Thank you. Those are fantastic points. There is actually a note from an audience member, David Gerges, thanking in particular Lisa and Fraline for sharing their experiences and insights about the importance of mentors, which we've been highlighting, but also a particular comment and question to you, Ayala. And I think my 10-year-old daughter, who is an avid basketball player, would share her interest in you being associated with the NBA. And David comments that your work for the NBA is truly inspiring. And as a passionate NBA fan, I'm eager to know your thoughts about how the name, image, and likeness will impact the future of sports and IP law, if you don't mind addressing that.
Of course. Well, the short answer is I don't think any of us know. The longer answer is a very interesting one. I would say as a sports fan for many years before I knew IP law existed, let alone practiced in a place where they intersected, I didn't think a lot about the business of sports, but there's obviously a gigantic economic and commercial ecosystem built around all sports. And I think the inequity that the recent debates, litigation, legislation over the ability of college athletes to earn some money from the commercial use of their name, image, and likeness really derives from the fact that money has been made from their name, image, and likeness for many, many decades, just not by them. And so I think it's an important development. And from an IP legal perspective, obviously, the right of publicity stems from the ability to control the commercial use of your likeness and identity. And that's important. So I do think it will change the business of sports for sure, and hopefully provide opportunities to athletes to continue to hone and practice their craft on the field without having to forego financial opportunity to maintain their amateur status or their collegiate status. One observation I would have from being at the NBA is a lot of the young men in the NBA, it's hard to succeed. It's hard to succeed, I'm sure Lisa will tell you, in any sport, but there are not a lot of opportunities to be a professional athlete and make money at it. And what's interesting is when these young men do succeed and are selected in the NBA draft and begin their careers, they are perhaps more prepared for the basketball than they are for the commercial side. And the one thing I really hope for these young student athletes is that there will be sufficient expertise and counseling for helping them navigate through the commercial side of this and through the opportunities of this. You don't want your name and image associated with the wrong kind of things. You don't want to chase what seems like a good opportunity without sufficient information and understanding and put yourself in a bad financial position. The NBA has a program for new players called the Rookie Training Program, and it is primarily not about basketball. It's about life. It's about helping to prepare these young men for success, for financial success, for the fact that, as Lisa says, they're entering careers with some real financial potential, but also necessarily short careers, and to think about and plan for the future. So I'm not sure how it will play out. It absolutely already has changed and will change the business of college sports marketing, sports broadcasting, all of that. But I hope for the athlete's sake that these opportunities come with some support framework and some good expert advice, because I think it's very easy for these young people to become overwhelmed by the opportunity and unfortunately sometimes taken advantage of.
Yeah, and these issues, particularly during this year on the 50th anniversary of Title IX, has particular resonance for women athletes, both collegiate and professional. And Lisa and Fraline, having played sports at the levels that they have, I'm sure they will share in the sentiment that we would be very pleased to see a day when the pay gap narrows between male and women athletes. and better support even at the collegiate levels and well before then to support women athletes, because athletics is not just about sports, it's about life, skill sets that you bring and deploy throughout your life. And so that is an important issue that we think about when we think about a topic like women in IP, because many of us bring different backgrounds, whether it's sports or music, and sometimes you start out in STEM, but not necessarily. And so it's really nice to see the conversions of these different worlds and experiences. So speaking of those conversions of experiences, I do want to hit on leadership for women in IP. Lisa, you really exemplify this concept, not only just as an IP attorney, but someone who leads in our IP community. You founded the ABA section on women in IP in 2015, which has been a wild success with, I believe, around 450 women joining that in the first week of its founding. Tell us about that experience and what it means.
Sure, thanks, Esther. Well, I was chair of the ABA IP section in 2014, and when my term ended in 2015, I wanted to stay involved in the section in the ABA. I really enjoyed it, my colleagues and the work and the substantive parts of what I learned. And so I thought, okay, we don't have a women in IP group. There's really no network for women. Somebody had actually tried to start a group years earlier, and I'm not sure what happened, but it never really took off. So I just started a group, and literally in the first week, 450 people signed up. It was ridiculous. I had no idea. I didn't even know there were 450 people in the section at the time. I mean, there were, at the time I was chair, there were 20,000 people. And so obviously I knew there were a lot of women, but I didn't know there was such a need. And we basically, what I did was I created different committees, and one of the committees was the GRIT committee, and that is patterned after the ABA Commission on Women in the Professions GRIT initiative. For those of you that have ever been involved in the Grit and Growth Project, it's believed that the most successful people are basically have more grit and they're able to grow. They're flexible in their growth. In other words, they persevere through their grit and their growth mindset. They're not necessarily the people that were #1 at Harvard or Yale or Stanford. If any of you were, I'm sure obviously you've done well for yourselves, but I was not, and I obviously have a lot of grit and growth in my background. So anyway, this group was great, and it's still going on. I passed the torch to 2 younger colleagues of mine, and they've been doing a great job, and they've continued on with the different committees. But the best part is it's created a neighborhood or a network for women, and we do have some male members, which is great, and we welcome them. But it's a community for women to talk about issues, both positive and issues of concern. It's a community to refer work to. It's basically a community which we all strive for, which we all advocate for. And there's many communities. I think Ayala mentioned, or I forget who mentioned that I know there's a women's community in INTA and AIPLA, and all the big organizations have them, and they're fantastic. And if you're not involved in any of them, definitely try to get involved. But it's a great networking opportunity. And that's where you could potentially find mentors. And the best part is you find great people and great friends and great colleagues. So it's a very rewarding group. All of these groups are very rewarding in so many ways.
How wonderful that when you saw a need, you just took it in your own hands and said, I'm going to build this. And
well, I was a little selfish. I wanted to stay involved. So it was a little self-centered, I must admit. But yes, I did. I like your spin on it better than mine.
You built it and they came.
I built it and they came.
Lisa.
Right. I tell good jokes, so they wanted some humor.
Well, it is important. And you say it was in part selfish, but it actually most definitely tapped into an unmet need that was very strong and was felt, and you were able to channel that in a very positive way, creating a networks of support and resources among women in IP, which is still to this day very sorely necessary. So Michelle, tell us about the importance of having a safe space for women in IP like that, where you can find resources and support outside of your own organization.
I mean, I think it goes without saying that it's incredibly important. And I think that I've been lucky enough to either find those spaces or create them myself. And Lisa, kudos to you for what you've done, because, you know, you've really set the bar and you're very inspiring, and you will inspire me and others that follow to follow in your footsteps. So thank you. But, you know, I think at some point you just in your career, you'll reach the enough is enough. And it, you know, my mama taught me, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And that, you know, that mantra just sort of took over. And I started to create some of those safe spaces, and to encourage others to, and to meet, you know, somewhat, you know, in private with, you know, members of my firm, other people that are in the different, you know, industries for which I cater to in my legal career, to ask something that I think, Sanjana, you said about the way in which I want to be seen might be different than the way others want to be seen. And sometimes, and myself included, we'll throw terms like diversity and inclusion and equality around, and it tends to become a generic term, which those of it IP tend to try to avoid, you know, so I think having those meaningful conversations one-on-one, getting to know the person in and by itself creates that safe space that we're talking about. Like, again, you're not alone. Tell me what it means to be seen, you know, to you. What has been happening? What would you like to be, you know, what would you like to see happening? And how do we collaborate? How do we get there? Because as corny and cliche as it sounds, there's power in numbers. And obviously we're not alone. Lisa, you started an organization, and in a week, 400 and something women similarly situated. And I guarantee that's a fraction, at least, of women who are aspiring to be a part of that group. You know what I mean? So just for me, it was every person I meet, and you know, everywhere I go, I want people always to feel safe with me, that I'm listening, I hear you, I see you, but tell me what it takes to feel seen in general. And then let's work towards that goal. So, and I think that we can all take these steps to create these safe spaces. It's almost like an elevator pitch. It's like wherever you go, make people feel seen and safe. And then, you know, maybe we'll see some good come out of those conversations.
That's a beautiful thought, Michelle, that the resources and support does not necessarily have to be in a formal structure, although those are critical and necessary, but that it can happen every day in organic ways, in various groups, wherever you are in the room and the spaces that you work in. Connected to being involved with the community and finding resources and support, pro bono is also a very important part of many of our experiences, both receiving it, you know, like me, when I was younger, surviving in this country as an immigrant, but also now being in positions to give and to pay it forward. Fraline, I know pro bono work is important to you. Can you share with us what that means to you and some examples of meaningful pro bono work that you've been involved with?
Okay, so first of all, thanks to Lisa and Michelle for explaining, you know, actually when taking things into your own hands, you know, if it's to be, it's up to me. You know, that mentality, I think, carries far. So as far as pro bono work, obviously there's always this community aspect to understanding pro bono work. So I'm quite aware, for example, of the USPTO's pro bono program and requirements. You know, we've all attended, for example, bar events talking about this type of work. And also as a DC bar and Illinois bar attorney, you know, you know, I'm invited obviously to be a part of these types of work, the work process and intake process. However, in terms of pro bono work, I'd say that here at Allgaier Patent Solutions is a part of the infrastructure of my business. You know, so if a case is complex, it doesn't hinder my willingness, for example, to sign up for pro bono work. It is something that obviously takes away from billable time. but there's always a way, to do something that is IP related and enjoyable. And getting involved in the community level is always a good way to start. You can build long-term relationships with clients and organizations. As a business owner, naturally, I'd say affiliated with local nonprofit organizations as a service provider. For example, one organization that comes to mind is the Chicago Inventors Organization, formerly called the Chicago's first Black Inventors Organization. So this group was formed a few decades ago, as a step towards helping local inventors, business owners, and startups learn about funding, the patenting process, and so on and so forth. So with regards to that, I was involved in the organization and had taken trips, for example, to Europe and saw something called an inventor's marketplace or an inventor's clinic, where there are several rooms set up for pro bono type service, where you would enter either as a startup with funding or without funding, but perhaps without knowledge, for example, of the patenting process. So each inventor or business owner or, startup or individual would enter this environment with an understanding that their needs would be met, in terms not just legal, but still understanding then perhaps the financial framework for moving forward with the IP process. So naturally, in this type of setting, you have quite a few women, coming in at various stages of conducting their business or just of having an interest. And as far as what I would do outside of, for example, a clinic or, a marketplace setting, with business owners, I have my own qualifications that would, for moving forward with as pro bono, with pro bono services, to match those of many of the services that you might be aware of. For example, is this person United States domicile or living in the United States? What is their household income? And they must be able to, for example, establish a certain status, in a patent application, as the patent attorneys here would understand. For example, are you a micro entity? Are you in the appeal phase? Did you abandon an office action? Where are you in the proceeding? Is this sort of a last minute attempt to rescue a patent application? Did you file a provisional patent application? So we kind of go through, all of these possible scenarios in determining, whether, this candidate would then qualify for pro bono. So, and, this approach to pro bono carries over then in terms of working with the organizations in the area, with changes in any changes, for example, in my status or in their status, we're able to communicate what would be necessary then to help, let's say, a group of clients then moving forward.
Yeah, such an excellent point. And I find that part of the beauty in pro bono work as women in IP is that you do get to explore in areas outside of your substantive expertise. Sure, we can work with WALA, Washington Area Lawyers for the Arts, and other groups to support IP work in pro bono capacity, but sometimes you get conflicted out because you work at an IP firm. But in areas of landlord-tenant cases or family law, criminal law, we have basically zero conflict footprint. So it gives us the ability to work on those real life cases where you're making a direct impact on clients who would otherwise go unrepresented. And so it's great to partner with the DC Bar Pro Bono Center and about 30 legal services organizations in and around the DC area. So there are plenty of opportunities for you to be involved in whether it's IP pro bono or outside of pro bono. Sanjana, so this makes me think about your earlier comment going from the patent space into the generalist space. And in the process of doing that, you also had to touch on an issue that is really common for women in general. And that is finding your own voice and finding the courage to raise your hand in uncomfortable settings. So tell me how that experience has come to you, even when you're interviewing for positions.
Sure. So I came to be in the situation that I'm in because my hand was raised for me. So some credit to my mentor who saw this in me. But I think the credit that I'll give myself is kind of going with the flow. I was like, this is happening. Let's go for it. But I think just as I'm evolving, as I'm growing and becoming more seasoned, I find myself being multifaceted. So I feel like there's more dimensions to me that I'm kind of peeling away and identifying for myself. And you kind of spoke about, how this helps me interview for positions, but I'll get to that. But what I'll do is I'll flip it a little bit and I'll say, when I was interviewing people for other positions, I felt that if you're interviewing for an IP position, the candidates that you're seeing all have excellent IP background. Like, we're looking at very seasoned attorneys, and that becomes level across the field. That becomes table stakes for you to be a good IP attorney. At that point in time, what is distinguishing you is something that you've done maybe on the periphery. Maybe you took IP and you brought a different dimension to your commercial deal. And interviewees start talking about that. You took IP and you brought a different dimension to how you rolled out confidentiality in your employment contracts. You took IP and you set up a fantastic center of excellence for your NDA process. And I felt like just as people were working in those different peripheries, that's what started distinguishing themselves from other candidates who then I felt were capable to come in and do the role. And I started looking at that experience and applying it to myself. And I'm like, how am I going to distinguish myself when I go in and interview for these roles? So even in the role that I was in, I started taking on stretch assignments. So I started doing work outside of the IP field at first for 10% of my time. I was like, I'm just going to dip my toes in it. I'm just going to start doing it and see how I feel. And then you do a good job at that and you get noticed, and then you don't have to do anything else because the work then just keeps coming to you. You're just starting like a waterfall effect where they're like, oh, she did this. She can do this also. Let's start considering her for this. And then let's start tasking her with these other things. So I think it's that snowball effect. You raise your hand the first time. You are trying to challenge yourself the first time. You start off with a little bit, take what you can chew and do a good job at. And that kind of snowballs into, well, yeah, I'm getting really good at this. I think I'm ready for like 180-degree pivot now. And I know that I'm going to do a good job. I know that my track record in the company speaks for itself, that now when you're having the chief patent counsel advise you on generalist issues, that advice is solid. She's done her research. She knows what she's talking about. She is a trusted partner and advisor. So there's a little bit of work in how you do those assignments at the front end. You need to kind of put in the time and due diligence when you start off. But I think that starts paying off in leaps and bounds as you go forward.
Yeah, and certainly when you're leaving the comforts of your substantive expertise in patents and beyond IP, there's a natural discomfort, the fear factor that arises, and you were able to overcome that by dipping your toes and gradually growing your expertise outside of that and expanding your subject matter expertise. And Ayala, I know that's something that you can personally relate to, starting with radiators and then later on becoming the chief IP counsel. So tell us about that experience, and also about what companies, what corporations can do to increase diversity at law firms. Ayala, you're muted.
It's only been 3 years. Eventually, I'll get the cadence of mute and unmute right at some point. I I have been, I hope I'm a strategic thinker in my work. I have been less strategic in my life. And I think what I've done in my life is not so much necessarily followed my passion in terms of, devoting my life to not-for-profit work, which many people have been brave enough to do, but following my engagement. I have always felt that when you are genuinely engaged in what you do, you are not only happier and more fulfilled, you actually wind up doing it better. I think anyone who has kids and sees the difference between forcing them to practice at an instrument they don't enjoy and watching them beg for more time to practice a dance or a sport they do enjoy, I think that translates to adulthood. And so what I would say to tack on to Sanjana in terms of raising your hand is I have never wanted to misrepresent my level of expertise. So it is often viewed as a very male quality to fake it till you make it. If some interesting assignment comes up, you raise your hand and you say, I got it, I've done it. I don't say that, but I say I can do it. And I'm very honest about the fact I've never tried this before, but it sounds really interesting. And I know, and then fill in your blank about your translatable skills. I'm very experienced at deep dive research and analysis or whatever it is. And so I too have found opportunity in very strange ways. I think one of the things that led to me being promoted to a deputy GC from an IP function is that I raised my hand to take on our budget, business, and strategy planning for the entire department. And it's not viewed as a very glamorous assignment, but what interested me was I thought, here's my way to understand the whole chessboard. I'm never going to be the labor lawyer specialist or the antitrust lawyer specialist, but if I do this, I'm going to really have an understanding of everything this legal department does. I didn't do it as a way to become deputy GC. I did it because I wanted to understand the work we were doing, but I think it helped me a lot. So I think opportunities exist everywhere. And if something sparks your interest and engages you, you should find a way to pursue it, because I think that's where you're going to succeed. I think in terms of what corporations can do, there's structural stuff and then there's just human stuff. I think on the human side, the more diverse the in-house lawyers are, I think the more conscious the clients are of issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the engagement of outside counsel. So outside of formal programs, I rely on many good outside lawyers, but I rely on many I rely on many more of them who are women, I think, than not because of any formal program, but because that's who I connect with and engage. They we don't have a lot of patent work at the MBA, and we got hit with a slew of non-practicing entity litigations about 15 years ago, before the statutory changes to litigation slowed that down a little. And we did an RFP for patent counsel, and we wound up selecting a woman who continues to be our outside counsel now. And what's fascinating and rewarding to me is I was able to connect her with other clients in the sports and entertainment industry. And she is now on the managing committee of her own firm. So I think her success with her clients is fostering her success at the firm. And then I'm not sure if you're still hearing me.
The sound is cutting in and out a little bit, but we've been getting largely your message.
Good. I'll stop you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your message.
Needs better connectivity than I do. Apologies.
No problem. About do what you love and love what you do. And I think that all of us can share that common theme in what we do in our respective organizations. Ayala, thank you for talking about personal ways in which corporations can help increase diversity at law firms. But I know even as small solo firms or boutique firms with more limited resources can also navigate through DEI initiatives and make a difference. Lisa, would you like to share what you're doing in that space and your observations?
Sure, thank you. And Ayala, a lot of what you said resonated with me. I think it's there are a couple of nuggets of conversations in there that we could talk hours about. But to answer Esther's question, I am a certified woman-owned firm, and my firm is a member of NAMWOLF, which is the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms. I've been certified maybe 7 years or so, despite having my firm for 21 years. A colleague of mine, excuse me, told me about NAMWOLF. And the nice thing for my firm and firms like my firm with NAMWOLF is that companies like Ayala's company, many companies participate in NAMWOLF, and they hire directly out of that group because they know that the NAMWOLF firms have been heavily vetted. It takes months. It took half a year, I think, to be vetted. You have to show a certain number of financials, years of business, number of attorneys, all kinds of statistics, longevity and stability, all kinds of things. And so it's really a fantastic group. There are other similar diversity initiatives out there, not so much substantive or firm related, but I want to give a plug for FDIPL, the Foundation for Advancement of Diversity in Law, in IP. It's an organization directly promoting law students, minority law students, and the focus is essentially career advancement, education on successful careers, things you can do to connect with established IP attorneys, learn how to interview, get exposed to various groups and speakers and topics. There's so many diversity initiatives out there. They should all be called together and put into one bucket so we can keep track, but there just really are so many different opportunities, and it's clear that diversity is at the forefront of people's minds, and a lot of good advances are being made in that regard.
Thank you, Lisa. In the remaining minutes, I'd like to do a lightning round of a sentence or two of the message you'd like to leave the audience on the topic of women in IP and challenges and opportunities. Fraline, you're on mute.
Young students out there listening, young professionals, see yourselves mainly as future leaders in the field of IP. It is good to be an expert at something, but how do you help someone? You know, what are the messages that you're sending based on, you know, how you listen to other people or not listen to other people? We live in a technological environment, but it all comes down to the baseline human elements and qualities that are important when we deal with each other. You know, you can gain trust as an individual level as a student, but be relatable, be approachable, be willing to listen to other people. And I would say that these qualities will always bring you forward and connect you with important people and further assist you with your career goals down the road. And this ties ultimately, you know, into the topics that we were discussing surrounding DEI.
Thank you, Fraline. Michelle?
I don't think I've ever spoke without saying this, but there is a saying in The Pursuit of Happiness by Will Smith that I live by, and is never let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do. And you will take no's and you will take hard hits, particularly like me in the entertainment industry. But, you know, you have to fight the good fight. You have to, you know, pay your dues, learn the business, be a good lawyer first and foremost. You know, do all the things that we're talking about in terms of, you know, networking and, you know, utilizing the resources that are at your disposal, making change, you know, taking initiative. And like what Fraline said, see yourself as a leader, because nobody is going to be a greater cheerleader for you than yourself. And it starts there. And I think people feed off of people who are natural born leaders, or at least have the confidence to try and become a leader. So like I said, don't let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do.
Thank you, Michelle. Sanjana.
I'm going to piggyback off of Michelle's comment. I think that one really resonated with me, Michelle. And my 2 cents is going to be brave, not perfect. I think as women attorneys, I'm pretty sure most of us in this group are extremely type A, perfectionists. We want to do it right. We want to do it absolutely right every single time and knock it out of the park. And that's great. But sometimes you need to let go of the perfection and just be brave. Go for those stretch assignments, raise your hand, be true about who you are to whoever's asking you to do it. Be true to yourself. So just try and be more brave than you are perfect, and you will find your way.
Thank you for that beautiful message. Ayala.
Hopefully people can hear me. I'm like a little delayed. I think Sanjana mentioned authenticity earlier on, and I agree with everything the women before me have said, but this is my deepest lesson in work and in life. People, particularly early in their careers, and especially women of color, are so concerned about being the right way, to speaking the right way, dressing the right way, doing the right thing. And the fact of the matter is, although, as Sanjana said, it takes bravery to be authentic, authenticity to me actually not only is not an obstacle to your success, it's going to drive it forward. Authenticity builds confidence, relatability, all the qualities of leadership that people here have spoken about. So if you can find the courage to be who you really are, it will not only make you happier and more fulfilled, I genuinely believe it will drive forward your success and make you, in turn, a very strong leader for others. So be your authentic self, as uncomfortable and hard as that is. That's a good place to practice bravery.
Thank you, Ayala. Lisa, you have the final word with 15 seconds.
Love it. Keep your eye on the ball, go for it, and be kind and respectful to everybody. And thanks so much, Esther. You were great.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight, and we are right on time. So Gary, I yield the floor, and thank you to all of the panelists.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of our attendees. I want to thank this incredible panel. I've been mesmerized by the conversation this whole time. You guys are all, I mean, just the words of wisdom. Plus, we've got a few bumper stickers now that I will be using. So I hope nobody will sue me. I actually wish I had known all of you earlier in my career, but the truth is probably a lot of you weren't even born when I started. So, but I'm going to make sure our IP students have an opportunity to see this. We will be putting this up on YouTube, but I'm going to make sure they have other opportunities to see this program as well. So thank you all. Quickly, I just want to thank our annual sponsors again: McAndrews, Helder Malloy, and Leydig, Voigt, and Mayer. And I want to wish everybody a good rest of the week. Thank you for helping us celebrate World IP Day. And everybody take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you all.